going to take you on a real-life smuggling mission into Mexico, so hang in there and try not to let this old guy bore you to death. Yeah, well, sometime you just get lucky. Okay, that's enough out of him. That 10 seconds was all I could stand. It was Mexico during the 1980s. From Brownsville, McAllen, and Laredo, aircraft are headed south. Old piston pounders were going. What happened was that Mexico raised the tariffs on imported goods up to 100% or more, which made it very profitable to fly aircraft loaded with contraband into Mexico. And that's where we came in because of the demand by the Mexican people. Very simple. It's a relatively unknown facet of aviation lore, the smuggling of contraband into Mexico. Very few people know about it. It's, my friends know about it, but not the general public. What some people will think is that we flew contraband south and flew drugs north. We did not do that. One or two wayward sons couldn't resist and they got caught. A lot of us were Vietnam veterans, and we had quite a few good Air America pilots. All FAA and U.S. Customs rules were fully complied with. We filed flight plans also. We were known as failcados, which is Spanish slang for importer of illegal goods. The Mexican people loved us because they got access to first-rate quality goods from around the world at reasonable prices. What it did involve was overflying Mexican customs checkpoints. If you were caught, your ass was grass and Mexico was the lawnmower. You were going to spend 9 years in a Mexican penitentiary unless you had enough money to bribe your way out. Aircraft were Beech 18 C-46s. 206s were used quite a lot, surprisingly. Interior of a DC-3 cockpit there, and a Queen Air. Queen Air was my favorite. I loved that Queen Air 65. Man, it saved my butt. 207s, yeah, we had a few, but not many. That's a DC-3. That's a typical loading operation there. That's me and the judge down in Poza Rica. He got caught. I didn't. Talk about luck, man. I'm going to give you a layout of where we are. This is the actual McAllen Airport runway here. Zoom in a little closer, show you how we got out of here. You've got McAllen right here, right there in the center. The airport's right here, where you see that little airplane, Reynosa over here. Rio Bravo. We would take off out of McAllen, run cross country, at least I was, about 200 to 500 feet, and go well east of Rio Bravo. And going into the mountains, I would go the opposite way. Across the river there, the taco curtain I call it, affectionately, and go the other way to go into the mountains. Now, when the shooting got started back in the late 80s, I would take off and go up to Edinburgh, climb to about 8,000 or 500 or 9,500 and head either east or west. That was to give the impression we were going north instead of going back across the border for the shooters laying in wait over here at Reynosa, at the Reynosa airport right here. I thought it was a bunch of baloney myself. Mexicans aren't stupid. They're really intelligent people. This is a, guess what, map of Mexico. See? That word says Mexico. We had two major hazards. One was this big ridge going down the length of the eastern side of Mexico. These mountains were in the 10,000 foot range, a little over 10,000, and we also had these on the other side. You know, they're an extension of the Rocky Mountains, and they go all the way down south of Mexico City and on into Guatemala, more or less. But what would happen was aircraft would get by these mountains. There's Victoria here. We had a pass here we went through. But what happened is that an aircraft would lose an engine in here. These elevations are around 6,500 feet. Well, getting out of here, it ain't going to happen. You're stuck in here. I had to modify that statement a bit. You're not really stuck, but here's the problem. Most guys flew the pass at 8,500. The elevation in there is 6,500, probably in some places 7,000. So you're only 2,000 to 2,500 feet above the ground. And in that time span, between the time you lose the engine and the time you hit the ground on a single engine, is not enough time to get the airplane unloaded. That's why I say you're stuck. That's why it's critical to get the hell out quick or you're committed. Like I said in the book, not exactly the Himalayas, but crossing them in the dark at night in an overloaded Aztec would make you think they were. Yeah, I just named it the Monterey Miracle because it was a miracle landing. There were a lot of miracles performed down there and a lot of tragedies. This guy out of Laredo pulled off what I call a miracle landing. He was in the high desert west of Monterey. He lost his starboard engine, could not maintain altitude. He was loaded at night, and he just picked what he thought was an open area and pulled it off. Now, if I'm sure a lot of you are pilots, and I can tell you that that was one amazing bit of flying. And I'm sure he'll agree that a lot of it was luck also. I don't know the guy's name. I've been trying to find out, but that was absolutely incredible. This is from the chapter titled Pan Am Wings. Me and Chuck took this flight. He was the captain. We flew from McAllen empty up to Laredo, picked up our load. We had Pan Am Wings on it, and that's the reason for the chapter title. And Chuck's an ex-Air America pilot, and I'm glad I was with him, because this was not a good flight. We picked up a lot of turbulence over these Razorback ridges just north and east of Saltillo here. The city of Saltillo is right in the center. To the right is ridges. They're 9,000 feet. Our cruising altitude was 10.5, so we're only 1,500 feet above them when we get to backfire. I looked at Chuck and I was thinking to myself, don't you think we ought to turn around, Chuck? But he kept on trucking. He was looking at his map. I did see him kind of flinch when we hit the backfire, though. Our airspeed dropped because of the load and the altitude down to the low 90 knots, if you can believe that. We were heavy. We had a backfire from a motor and rattled and shook for a while. Chuck just kept on trucking. I didn't tell him, but I wanted to turn around, but he didn't. Probably just some crappy gas, which happened quite a lot down there. But, well, I was glad to see the lights of Guadalajara from way out here. It was a clear night, thank goodness. We didn't have any trouble with weather down here. Made it on into Colima. They offloaded us, and we didn't need fuel because of the long-range tanks, but we came back okay. The engine backfired again as we closed in on the mountains naturally, and but anyway, made it back in. We made it through the storm. It was vicious, one of the most violent storms I've ever been in an aircraft in my life. On all night flights, after landing, we left the aircraft. The engines were left idling, and we went and hid in the brush, behind a hill, anything. If we saw lights coming in the distance, we moved in the opposite direction and proceeded to escape and evade. And in the daylight, your ass was cooked anyway, so all you could do was run in the woods, and that was about it. So I would hang around and take pictures and stuff, but I was constantly looking around me. Engine failures were always a major concern in the small aircraft with no autopilot. It was impossible to get the cargo out. But escape hatches were hard to find on the border. What would happen is that an aircraft would lose an engine, and they were so overloaded, of course, they couldn't maintain altitude, so they put it on autopilot, the ones that had an autopilot, which was very rare. But they would pull the escape hatch off, throw everything out the hatch except for the big TVs. In case you're wondering, we never heard of anything hitting anybody on the ground, though I would hate to be hit in the head by a VCR moving at 120 miles an hour, that's for sure. St. Peter would say, "How did you die, son?" They'd say, I got hit by a VCR doing 120. St. Peter would say, what? Just in case y'all think I'm sitting here bragging about myself and how great a pilot I am, which I'm not, I want to show you this. I was on a strip, a perfectly good strip, but it felt like it was really soft, so I decided to steer off the strip and get stuck. Immobilizing yourself while smuggling contraband in Mexico is, as you can imagine, not a good idea. You see all these pretty pictures? Well, these pictures were only shot quickly. They unloaded the plane as quick as they could. I helped them in between time. Object of your expedition is to get the hell out as quickly as possible. You never want to jeopardize yourself or your partners in crime. You want to minimize your mistakes and learn from them and never make them again. Yeah, boy, like we didn't have enough to worry about. We got mountains, night flying, IFR, storms, fog, people running around with their lights off down there at night. Our main problem was fuel. We never had enough. If you could not make your strip, you were done. I had some very close calls, especially Costa Rica. I would come back, especially in the winter with the weather, and I wouldn't make it in, and I would come back to McAllen and, man, on fumes. Oh, baby. Yeah, McAllen would start shutting down weather-wise on the way in. A couple of times fuel got so critical I even considered landing in Mexico and south of Reynosa and Rio Bravo, because if you ran out up there and had to land close to them, they'd be on you real quick. All we had back then was LORAN. It was a system of triangulation, and all the stations were based in the U.S. Mexico did not have LORAN, so at about 250 nautical miles south of McAllen or Tampico, the LORAN would start giving up the ghost. At that point, what I would do is hold the last good heading I had off the LORAN and proceed to what I thought would be the strip. But for example, if I didn't have this strip marked here with little arrows, would you be able to find it? Quick story, we did have guys, believe it or not, with a load on board, land at a real live Mexican airport and try to BS themselves into fuel, into getting fuel from the Mexican airport. Now, at all Mexican airports, as far as I know, there's always some kind of policia at the airport. And they would try to BS the policia with no papeles, which means papers. The next thing they know, they were in handcuffs. Some people wasn't that stupid, but some of them tried it out of desperation. Yeah, old Bob, he did a great job putting that Queen Air 80 on the beach at Tuxpan, but he didn't have a lot in the technical needs of escaping and evading. Yeah, you stay down there long enough and do it long enough, you're going to get your ass handed to you by these Mexicos sooner or later. Somebody gets pissed off at somebody and your ass is in a crack, a bad one. The one coming up was bad, but I got another one even worse. I don't consider this as bad because I didn't have enough time to think. It was all reaction. The other was just waiting and wondering. We're going down to Rio Verde, about 80 miles east of San Luis. We're going down to Rio Verde, Mexico, about 15 miles north, where, like I said, I didn't have a pleasant day. And I never liked this place because the guys were always acting really odd, like anxious, in a big hurry. I like for them to be in a big hurry, but they were really in a big hurry. So anyway, the strip is about 2,800 feet long. Got a big power transmission line here. I came straight in. I never did a pattern when I fly into these places because you don't, the less noise, the better. My usual parking place was about in between these two trees here. My loaders backed up real quick. I didn't like that because I like to back them up myself for obvious reasons. But I got out, I stood on top of the wing, and I gave a long look around like I did on almost every landing. I looked for dust coming, dust trails, look for any obvious things, anything that seemed out of place or whatever. At the time, this brushy area there was cleared like this area, no place to hide. So, from my observation post above the wing about 12 feet or so, I assumed all was well. But I'm about to get a lesson in Mexican camouflage techniques, possibly taken from Emiliano Zapata or Pancho Villa days. We got it unloaded. I applied full power for takeoff, but I had to stop about here and something hit the airplane. Not loud. I don't think it was a bullet. I don't know what it was, but something hit it. So I thought that the receivers had stopped and came back and threw something at the airplane to get me to stop for paperwork. That's rare. It had happened once or twice before, but I stopped and I opened the door, looked back, and I saw a dust trail of them, I assume, were leaving out on this access road. So I got back in the plane, slammed the door. At that point, I got my first shot. It went through the right windshield support post, almost hit me in the head, sprayed me with fiberglass, and exited out the left windshield support post. I was stunned, and I sat there for about 5 seconds, which was a big mistake. And then they started opening up for sure, because I was getting hit bad. At this point where I was, I couldn't take off now because at the time there were trees under the power line. I added power. I finally realized after I got sprayed with fiberglass that I was getting shot and I needed to get the hell out. So I added a lot of power, too much power. I got to the end and I couldn't stop, so I did the only thing I could. I did a tricycle gear ground loop, and the thing held together. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was going to rip the gear out from under it, but Beechcraft builds some tough aircraft, some good, tough aircraft, and Lycoming builds some great motors, as most of you know. So I leaned on, I did the only thing I could. I got lined up, and I knew I was going to get hit going back. But I leaned over in the seat as far as I could, laid down flat, pulled the wheel back with my left arm and hand, and just gave it the power. I didn't know how much power I gave it. I might have even exceeded the red line, but because I had the superchargers on it. But I got above the dust cloud. I was empty, 680 horsepower. So you can imagine it was performing very well at this elevation of about 6,000 feet. I glanced up as soon as I knew I was by the shooters. I slapped the gear and the flaps up. I was empty. I had 680 horsepower and I was climbing like a bat out of hell. I got to this road up here and I saw my receivers driving like a bat out of hell, making a dust cloud of their own. But I had other things in mind. They knew what was coming, obviously, and they were making haste. But I'm up. I got 680 horsepower. I'm climbing up to 1,000 feet, coming around. And I'm not happy about the situation. I like Mexicans, but I'm going to put their heads in the dirt. So I'm coming around. I got full power on it, and I'm up around well into the caution range, 200, 220 knots. I didn't care. But the controls were real stiff. Now, my thought also was that they were reloading, but all of them, and at the same time, that was a bad decision. So I get to about there, and controls were stiff, and I decided to make a hard left turn in front of them instead of going over them. That brilliant thinking earned me a bullet in the left wing. Came up through the top. I got shot in the right horizontal stabilizer and another one in the right wing, which put a hole in the fuel tank. It made for an interesting ride home because I was losing fuel pretty bad. It was streaming out. That 100 octane was streaming out right behind the motor. Oh man, I didn't like that. Ron and I have been in some really tight spots down there, and that's no lie. But this next one coming up was scarier than the one that I just told you about, because we didn't know the what and the where they were coming from and who they were. El Comandante here, he may not look too intimidating, but there were plenty down there who were. And by the way, he didn't have to slap you around. He would get somebody else to slap you around. Let me tell you a quick story about this photo. The guy in the red shirt, he saw me pull out my camera. He posed and he yelled for the other two guys to look over too. And it actually came out real good. There's a 55-gallon drum of Mexican fuel on the ground. Alongside it is a tin can of extra virgin olive oil that they used to transfer up into the plane. On the other side, if you look under the fuselage, is a guy, and I'm worried like hell he's going to hit the propeller. It was a nerve-wracking experience. That was from Chapter 13, Rocky's Last Flight, and the other one is 18, Dust Storm at Rio Verde. I wanted to thank a gentleman from the Netherlands, of all places. He had found me on the internet, and he sent me these pictures he took in 1986 in McAllen of all the DC-3s that were parked around there. And I can't remember his name right now, but real nice guy. I really appreciated his going to the trouble of doing this. I was there at the time, but I never met him.
There's a new one here, Sky Freighters. I think that's O'Neill's, I'm not sure though. One that needs to be inspected. Like a good looking airplane. I think that one's KDD's. That's the one they had in trailer plane for $39,000.
This one belonged to KDD Aviation. He was actually an importer who bought his own airplane. It only made 1 or 2 flights before Chuck and I left it in the muck south of Lyon. And that was a bad flight. It cracked a case on the right engine as it went up on its nose. And that was a bad flight. We could have been killed in it real easily. And on the way home, after 3 days in Lyon, we ran through a Mexican roadblock and barely got our butts out of there. It was an absolute miracle.
Jim, somebody, he was down in Mexico for about 8 or 9 months after it got shot with machine gun fire. Got about 93 bullet holes in it.
Well, some do, some don't. Ben O'Neill's South Central Aviation was the biggest exporter, aircraft supplier to the contraband industry in South Texas. He had a captured C-46 at Victoria, Mexico. I had the bright idea of going down there and stealing it back from the Mexican and getting Ben to give me a $10,000 bonus for stealing it. Yeah, I actually went down there. I rented a car out of Victoria, drove to the airport, hid it in the woods, crept up on the airport, and I saw that they had the C-46 parked in a big open area that I could have gotten into. The problem is when you crank this thing up, you can't just add power and go. You got to give it time to warm up, and that 10 minutes or so that it takes, you could be eating lead. So we were a pretty wild crowd down there. It was a game of machismo sometime, you know, bravado, like who could take the most bullet holes without getting hit. I thought seriously about doing it, but Ben O'Neill got word of it, and he told me in no uncertain words, do not touch my C-46. We're under negotiations now to get it back. Okay, Ben? Would I have done it if he had agreed to it? Well, I'll tell you what, talking about it and actually doing it is two different things. But the warm-up time on those motors, man, I don't know. You'd have to sit there and, oh boy.
And, or somebody down there, they paid somebody to get it back. And, anyway, they get patched up all the holes and got it back on the line. Jim Falls used to fly it. I think he had a cowling come off of it one night down there south of Tamuine and had a fire, and airplane went into a dive and all kind of stuff happened to it. Anyway, he was able to get it back home again. They had to unload half the airplane, I think, in order to make it stay in the air.
Yeah, that was actual voice recording from 1987. If you heard that, in order for it to stay in the air. That was a common practice. The co-pilot on the DC-3s and the kicker on the C-46s were required to get out of their seats and go to the back and throw out all the stuff that they could out of the back to make the airplane lighter in case of engine failure and in order to make it home. These things would not fly on a single engine with these loads. Okay, let me orient you a little bit. This is Reynosa, right? Oh, get out of there. Right across the river is McAllen. Brownsville is over here. That's Ron Fox territory. I'm going down. I'm going to zoom into La Pesca. Where's La Pesca? Is that? I think this is it right here. That's Simon Bolivar. Nope, that ain't it. Hey, Las Mujeres, the women. Oh, that's where I want to live. Right where them women are. Hey, Playboy magazine said in the 1980s that McAllen, Texas, of all places, had the highest majority of women over men. And I can tell you, whoever wrote that article, they knew what they were talking about. Now, where's La Pesca? Oh, man, this might be it right here. Yay, there we go. These next one is courtesy of Captain Ron Fox of bushwings.com/stories. We're going down to a Beech 18 here that got shot in his right engine. This is the shooter here. He got spun around. That's a Piper Aztec that got a little too ambitious. This is the shooter. Looks like he spun it around in deep sand at the last minute. According to Ron, Joe told him that he got out of his Beech 18 and commenced blasting away at the Mexicans. That's one thing I would never do. I enjoyed this cat and mouse game. If I was caught, it's hands up and hopefully they don't kill me or whatever they're going to do to me. However, according to Ron, Joe told him that his shooting allowed the kid to get away, and he did. Joe went to a hotel in La Pesca, I believe, the next day to have a little fiesta, congratulating himself on his getaway. Well, the next day the hotel was surrounded, and Joe's next fiesta was a little less festive. You know, all this stuff I'm telling you is a true story. It's not a bunch of made-up baloney. I'll save you that noisy intro. I do it just to wake you up, but we're going down to Querétaro. It's a silver mining, beautiful city in central Mexico, just south of Guanajuato. I've been assigned to pick up two guys in distress. They had gotten themselves in a peck of trouble with an airplane and had to abandon it and needed a way home real quick. They had no papeles. Boy, I'm telling you, papeles were a big deal. All you had to do was go across the border and get you some papers to be in the country for 60 days, but everybody, including me, put it off until we really needed it, and our papeles were at home. So, okay, we finally got smart and got the papeles. The plan was for me to sit at the end of the runway and our two guys were going to hide over here in the ditch. And I had to sit there with the motors running ready to go. I got 800 horsepower, man. Papeles aside, I was happy about this trip kind of because I would get to fly their Queen Air, which I can't think the name of it is right now. I would fly down without a load. That was especially appealing, and I would make $500 on top of that. So I was kind of looking forward to it in a small way. I discovered the value of them because I barely got my butt out of there. But I told the guys by phone from McAllen that they would have 1 minute, uno minuto, to get in that aircraft when I landed. Of course, there are reservations about that requirement. Indeed. Allow me to explain. That wait time can be extended out to 5 minutes, maybe a half an hour, because I want my $500. However, if I see somebody coming out of that terminal area in a fast-moving vehicle, that wait time can be modified to 3/10 of a second. Because the next thing you know, El Comandante aquí, he come to the aeropuerto and he wants to know why you gringos are at his airport. And so as it came to pass, I met them on the north end of the runway, and they took about 1 minute to get in the airplane, which was excruciatingly slow, but we got there. I took off, and without those turbochargers and superchargers, I used up almost all of that runway. It surprised the heck out of me. And that aircraft I finally figured out was called an Excalibur, and all was well. And I got my $500. And I took a little vacation in Las Mujeres. But on in, we're going to get close because I want to show you something. We're just on the outskirts of Mexico City, northwest, and this is where Al got caught, and I should have gotten caught. Yes, sir, a fire and smoke in the cockpit was never so welcomed. I'll explain that in a second. Kind of like an aircraft carrier, it sits up on a ridge. At the time, all of this you see here was not here. This is all land like this. But we would come in. This is 8,500 feet above sea level, and we would taxi off. All of this was not here. All these airplanes, no, nothing was here in the 1980s. We landed, got off at that last taxiway, and parked in front of that little orange terminal building there, because that's why I noticed that ridge right back there. So anyway, I'm about half an hour after Al. Al's coming in first, and he parks. And I told Al beforehand, I said, watch that ridge, Al, that's where they're going to come from. And one of the most vulnerable places, times you can have in an aircraft down there doing this is when the truck is parked between the aft wing and the horizontal stabilizer. That means you're trapped. You can't go anywhere because the truck is blocking your movement. And I said, watch for it. Right at that time, plan an escape route, run across the runway. Hell, I don't know, do anything you have to, Al. So Al gets out of his plane. They start to unload with the truck parked behind the wing, and here they come. They got Al. He said they poked a gun in his back and handcuffed him, hauled him off. Spent about a year in jail. He was able to bribe himself out. He got money. I think he said $50,000 is what it cost. But what happened to me was I had a little fire under the instrument panel, behind the instrument panel, that went out, thankfully, when I turned the master switch off. But I got a lot of acrid electrical wire smoke. But that's why I say I'm extremely lucky. Oh man, that was a bad day for my friend Al. I really like that guy. Real nice guy. He's from South Texas. But that's the way it goes. With me, there are three forms of scared. Scared, really scared, knee-shaking scared. But this next incident had a name of its own. I call it that because it almost gave me a freaking heart attack the way everything worked out. Okay, we're coming from McAllen, way off the map, way up there. We're keeping Poza Rica to our left, out my left, and we're headed into the pass. Perote is the gateway city for this pass here. As long as you had it off to your left, you were on course for all the smuggling strips up in here. They're all over the place. Veracruz is down here. There's Jalapa. Okay, we're going to go down to a representative strip. I couldn't find the actual strip. To be quick. All right, this is a good representative strip. It's good because we had a road at the end that curved off to the left, and the road at top curved off to the right. So I've got Senor Pepe in the right seat. We make our approach, and I say, man, this road is awful narrow, Pepe. Hang on. We got 2 feet of clearance on both sides of the main wheels. Left flap just missed a cut-in ridge to the left, and the right flap overhung the deeply plowed field. I knew we were in trouble from the get-go. So I'm landed, I'm stopped, the guys are there. We started unloading and refueling mine. I'm trying to cut this short. So I see Rocky. I'm looking everywhere, okay? The sky, I'm looking for airplanes, customs aircraft coming in from the sky. I'm looking at the ground, both ends of the runway. And here comes Rocky. I said, Rocky, do not land. We're refueling. If you land, you're going to block me in. So long story short, of course, Rocky lands anyway, comes up behind me, and stops about 50 feet away. So now we're trapped. He can't go anywhere. He's loaded. We're almost unloaded in mine, but still working on it and still working on refueling. Unbeknownst to me, thank God, we had an outrider who was very observant. He was probably positioned at a point like this, looking down this road. He saw people coming. But of course, we didn't know who they were or when they were going to get here. And we didn't know he was even out there. And we didn't know his Land Rover was colored green, meaning Army, which will contribute to my upcoming stroke. So me being Mr. Observant, as soon as he rounds his curve, I'm already looking up that way. Here he comes. He's got lights flashing and he is hauling ass it. So I yell at the Jefe, my compadre, hey, what is this? Who is this coming? And he looks, he hesitates a few seconds, and then he turns around and hauls ass back to his truck. And his compadres, seeing him haul ass, also take heed and haul ass. That leaves Senor Pepe and myself, seeing the Land Rover hauling ass toward us, green in color, thinking our careers as swashbuckling adventurers is quickly coming to an end, as who else can be in there but soldiers or federales. To my surprise, the green-colored Land Rover, with only a single Mexican in it, hauls ass around us out into the rough plowed field, shaking from side to side, yells at me something that sounded like, "Get the hell out of here." So at once I was relieved, but I was also wondering who the hell is coming. So how in the hell are we going to get out of here, I thought to myself, and I don't know how much time we got. I hope he gave us enough. So I climb into that sorry-ass Aztec at 9,600 feet. I tell Rocky and Senor Pepe to stay the hell out. I want to make it as light as possible because I got to go into a subsoil plowed field. If any of you are farmers, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's heavy, plowed, ruddy, high clods, 18 to 24 inches tall. Will this landing gear take it? I don't give a shit. We're going to do it. And I'm thinking if Rocky wasn't so big, I would strangle him if I could. I had to crank the right engine because we had it shut off because we had to unload the VCRs from the nose compartment. So I tried to crank it, and of course all I got was that good old Continental whoomp, whoomp, whoomp. So I ran full power up on the left engine and ran it into that deep plowed field, and somehow the landing gear managed to not collapse. It took a beating, but I got around Rocky's airplane and up onto the road, but I'm still looking down the road expecting anybody and their brother to come rounding that curve and straight up toward us. But I finally get Rocky and Pepe in the airplane, and that's another story I'll spare you the circus of. I leaned the engines out for the altitude, begin the takeoff, and guess what? Here comes the downslope fog that had built up on the ridge to the left. It's coming our way, and it hits us right at takeoff. Just as I added power. Oh, God. I mean, I'm reliving this in my mind right now, and the stress was out of this world, and we still did not know who was coming and when they were going to get there. Our situation now is acute. We don't know what's coming. The fog has obscured the end of the road. The fog, thankfully, is translucent. I run through heavy gaps that are replaced by lighter gaps where I can actually see the road. I had 180 in the compass for reference, but we are still up a creek. Rocky was a great guy, a patriot in Vietnam and a Green Beret. He's known around the world, really. And don't worry, I've made some boneheaded errors myself. Let me tell you young people something. Don't live your lives in a cubicle if you can. I know some of you don't have a choice, but just fall somewhere in the middle ground. Don't go to the extremes like I did. And don't fall for that political correctness bullshit like they're teaching you in school. We're becoming a nation of pussies. If we have to go to war, we might as well say, we give the fuck up. You got it. This is from chapter 12 in the book. I intercepted their shooter one day, but the circumstances happened to be ideal, and I got away with it. No one was hurt, but I found out, you'll read it in the book, but I found out that I had a nickname. I was called La Gringa because my last name is, which is a Spanish female's first name. This Cessna 404, I used to own one. It's an underpowered piece of crap, but one thing it did have was those 400-gallon wet wing tanks. And it would fly for a good 10 hours. 10 hours at around 170 knots, something like that at altitude. Maybe 180 if you push it hard, but I wouldn't push those Gitsos too hard because they're crap. They crack a case quicker than you can crack a pecan. I was coming back late one evening. It was getting dark, but I still had sunlight off to the left. I was at 10,500 coming back north from the Tampico area. I had a Cessna 210 pull up alongside me. I saw him coming. Now, when I say I was alert in Mexico, I was alert all the time. I mean, I'm looking, constantly looking, slight pauses for relaxing. But I saw him coming up behind me, close. Pulls up beside me and just stops and sits there. Now the sun was behind him, so I couldn't see who it was, and I couldn't see if it was Mexican or U.S. registration. But he sits there for a good 2 minutes. I'm looking at him, he's looking at me. I wave at him. I don't get a silhouette of a return wave back. So I waved at him again, no wave back. I said, okay, screw you. If he pulls a gun, I can probably see him pull a gun, because I thought if he was anything, he was a Mexican customs agent flying back to Reynosa. So after about a couple of minutes, he just adds power and dives into the cloud ahead of me. I was in the Queen Air. I could have followed him into the clouds, but I figured what the point. But that was just one of the strange things that happened. Another strange thing was at the border, at the Taco Curtain, the Rio Grande. I would cross over here east of Rio Bravo, and I would come up on the river at night, and somebody on the ground would shine a spotlight at me. And I would blink my landing lights back because, I was almost home. I didn't care. So I figured it was either a drug smuggler shining their spotlight at me with nothing else to do, or it was on the other side of the border, and it was a border patrol agent trying to scare me off thinking I was a drug smuggler. But that was just a couple of the odd things that happened. I passed up this guy going into Costa Rica. But in the smaller aircraft, you had a plywood section behind you and VCRs to your right that were all the way up to the instrument panel. And you had to be careful against shooters approaching you from the right because you couldn't see them because of the VCRs. I got my butt in trouble one day with those VCRs. Before a flight, you had a lot of time to think. You knew you were going to be faced with a lot of threats. You were by yourself and how you were going to work those threats. And it was psychologically unnerving at times. Okay, pretend it's your flight, your aircraft, and your butt, and the butterflies have started rolling around in your stomach. You learn a lot. Really just by looking at what kind of load you're going to have, and I can tell by the tilt that I've got a real aft center of gravity. As you can imagine, it'll legally hold around 1,500 to 1,800 pounds of cargo. I've got, like I said, 3,750. But you learn that you can either fly with the load and make money, or you can go home and not make any money at all. If it's real easy to steer as you move out, you've got an aft load. If you walk up to the doorway and your loaders yell at you not to step on it, because it'll fall on its butt. You know you've got a real aft load. As long as you treat these planes as if you're flying a single engine aircraft, you're okay. Yeah, I know that's a stretch, but if you lose an engine on takeoff, you just pull back the power on the other one and land. Try to find a field. There's a lot of cotton fields around there. In other words, they treat airplanes like a semi, and you're a truck driver. As far as customs inspectors, this guy on the left with a pistol on his hip, he was a real nice guy. He would come over to our side and check us out to keep us from having to go to his office and climb over the cargo. He knew what a hassle it was. He was just a nice guy, and I really appreciated him. Most of them were pretty lazy. They wouldn't even come out to inspect the cargo inbound or outbound. Maintenance for some of these operators was practically non-existent, but with the company I worked for, and Dean, his name was Dean, my boss, he was an excellent mechanic, and he went to work for the drug eradication program in Colombia after this kind of shut down, about '89. I want you to understand that this was 1987. The shooting had gotten worse. Two or three aircraft had gotten shot down, and a lot of people left, and I didn't blame them. But this ramp was filled far more than it is now with DC-3, C-46s, a DC-7 even. I mean, loaded to the gills. We have lower-end coordinates. We have never been to this strip before. We have no idea what it looks like. It's just a vague outline that Armando and the gang have given us. Now, here's another thing. Armando and his dad, they were great people. I really liked them a lot. Great Mexicans. And they flew a load about once or twice a month. So from experience, you knew that anybody who only flew a load once or twice a month to different airstrips, that the odds that they have paid off the owners of that airstrip is slim to none. That's what you really had to watch out for. Now, if you land at an airstrip that is owned by somebody and he happens to be there when you arrive and he has not been paid off, the odds are you're going to get your ass shot, blown away, whatever, tortured, killed. You know, that happens in Mexico. These people are not pussies. You've heard of the term machismo? The Mexican use, it means bravado. It's like we used to be in the U.S. before we became a nation of pussies. Mexicans applaud machismo. I gave them a lot to applaud about. I gave them too much, but they like me. And you want them to like you, especially the ones on the south end whom your very life depends on. Your getting home depends on. They got to be there. They got to have your fuel. Your existence depends on them, so you keep them happy. I don't know what most people think of Mexicans, but I can tell you for a fact, I'm in love with them. When your ass depends on them, like mine did, and they never fail me, you fall in love with these people. Yeah, when you, just before you leave, you'll get one of them to tell you, "No worry, Bill, la pista es muy seguro." The strip is very secure. Now, you know, I've talked highly of them just now, but they do tend to exaggerate things. So when they said, "Muy suerte, Bill," meaning the strip was safe and it's going to be no problem, then you knew to be very careful because there probably was going to be a problem. Yeah, boy. Now let's go to Monterey for a little surprise. Yeah, no kidding. But for now, you've called McAllen ground and said, "Hey, I changed my mind. I want to go home." You just cleared customs on the right. You're back in your plane. It's heavy. You got an FCG, and you got the butterflies flying around like a hive of bees in your gut, and you're wondering what's going to happen this time. But everything was different every day. Every flight was different, and that's why I enjoyed it so much. I kept it low on takeoff because it's so hot in McAllen, even at night. I got to 120 as soon as possible to get some cooling air over them cylinders. I stayed low, very low. Got the airspeed. If I lost one, I would have some maneuverability before I had to pull the other one back easily and land in a cotton field. That's Rio Bravo at top right. At this point, crossing the river southbound, I'm usually 200 to 500 feet, depending. And I'm usually a lot lower than this. I'm having to do it by computer because I don't have any video of this. But this time we'll be going west of Reynosa to southeast of Monterrey. Monterrey, Mexico has a huge textile industry, and that's where all of this Chinese silk is going, tax-free. So, without further ado, we stagger off of McAllen's runway and stumble up to 3,500, or at least I thought it was. It's actually 2,900 if you look at that altimeter. After another 20 minutes or so, I eventually reached 2,950. With 3,000 pounds in the back, you ain't gonna climb very good in a Queen Air. You may be thinking, why didn't he climb higher? Well, number one reason was I couldn't. I was using 2 extra inches of manifold pressure over normal just to maintain cruise flight. That's like a guy passing the 10th floor on the way to concrete and saying, so far so good. Half hour out. Do you really know what that means? That's a half an hour of intense thought. My problem was I'm too creative. I think too much. You think about Mexican torture methods. You think about the longevity of your chosen career. You think about your ass. And you think about what a bunch of pussies Americans are. With our politically correct armed forces, if we ever invade Mexico, take my word, we are going to get our asses kicked hard. That is not a cut on the bravery or integrity of the American fighting soldier. It is a cut on the abject stupidity of political correctness and the shit that they are feeding our kids in high school and colleges nowadays. You can say what you want about what I did for a living here for a few years, but one thing I was not was a politically correct American pussy. This is where it gets real serious. Real serious. I'm on a 2-mile final on the edge of my seat, and I'm looking for everything. I got my eyes wide open. Everything hangs on this, and you can only do so much. But my first look is that big wooded area to the left. That's my escape route if I can possibly make it there. I'm checking the sky all around me here. The sky, the ground, looking as far left, as far right as I can for any customs, Mexican customs aircraft. And I know I'm working for Armando and his dad, as I explained earlier, so I know that this is going to be a very dangerous drop. To quote from my book, at this point, you don't know whether to shit, go blind, or vomit, but the urge is to do all three. It was all kind of ways to get yourself screwed up down there. This is the sound of my voice as recorded that day. I knew I was in deep doo-doo. I never knew that was on there until I turned up the audio while editing this video. It came as a surprise. I can't take off because my load is too heavy. Now the strip looks long, but it's not because of the wide angle lens. I could attempt to take off. I could dump some of the stuff out on the strip, but that would mean taking my attention away from what's coming. Anything could pop out of the woods right now. Vehicles, police, federales, anybody. But my ass is fixing to head into the tree line on the right like I told you earlier. Believe me, the last thing I want to do right now is to go into the woods and run. It's almost dark, very dark. Oh boy. So I just sit there. I think I sat there for at least 15 minutes. See that? That tells you everything you need to know. These old boys ain't paid nobody off. Just waiting for them to show up, and I did not know if they were going to show up at all. Okay, in defense of Armando and his dad, sometimes the money was given to the receivers. But what would happen is that the receivers would take a chance and keep the money. And I think that's possibly what happened here. But you just never know. You know, he could have been just looking like I was looking. You know, because you're never safe. He's never safe. They might just happen up on the strip, and that's it. You're caught.
Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. Armando, okay. Que vengan los viajes ahorita porque checamos todas las veces y están tapadas las cercas de los caminos porque hay mucha agua, hay mucho soquete. Hay chance de jalar en la mañana y en la tarde mañana si Dios quiere. Okay. Sí.
That message was for Armando, and Armando must have told him I had my camera with me and to do that because I didn't motion him to come over. I was just taking video. This was a good crew. They worked as fast as they could. These packages were really heavy. Yeah, C-46, I flew co-pilot on them, and the problem with the DC-3 and the C-46 was your time on ground. You're landing at 6,000 or 7,000 feet. You may have had a DC-3 or C-46 in front of you. The crew is going to be dead tired, and you're going to spend a good hour, possibly an hour and a half at times, on the ground. And I don't need to tell you after watching this video that the less exposure time on the ground, the better. So I tried to stay with the Queen Air and T-Bones. So you may wonder why there was not a lot of real live video in this video. It's because it was necessary to pay very close attention to what you were doing and your surroundings. This is that Mexican 404 I showed you earlier, and I told you that I found out my nickname was La Gringa from the Mexican Customs. The way I found that out was that after I intercepted them, I was twirling the radio frequencies to see if I could catch them talking, and I did by a stroke of luck. And he called me La Gringa. He said, you had a good idea with that when I dove into the overcast. I later saw him talking on the phone at McAllen Aviation, and I approached him. I was going to ask him about that day in the sky. He turned away. He didn't want to talk. He had his machismo crushed. Yeah, that was a good day. I got back to McAllen. I was going to brag about it, and nobody believed me. Nobody could be that crazy. I guess they didn't know me too good. I nailed them, boy. Don't you know, I just thought of this right now. Don't you know that they wondered for quite a while how I knew their frequency? In closing here, I wanted to mention the judge. We're not sure if he was a judge or not, but he called himself one, and that was fine with me. But about 1987, I made the last of my trips with him and his crew of Jorge and Vaquero, the cowboy, real nice people. And I'd taken off, climbed about 500 feet, and got an urgent call on the FM radio from his wife. She was frantic, speaking in rapid-fire Spanish. I couldn't hardly understand a few words of it, but We found out later he had gotten caught within a few hundred yards of the strip. So what does that say for my luck? For those of you that read the book, this is the same strip where Al Parker had crashed, and the judge kept him overnight. Al came back the next day on the bus, but the aircraft, his Queen Air 80, was destroyed. I was honored to work with several ex-Air America pilots on the Tex-Mex border during the 1980s. The pilots I recognized at the beginning of this video, Jesse, Steve, Dick, and Rocky Neeson, took part in the war in Cambodia and Laos. Their efforts required several divisions of North Vietnamese troops and Pathet Lao to be occupied in those countries and away from South Vietnam. In effect, their efforts indirectly saved hundreds, if not thousands, of American and South Vietnamese and our allies' lives. And I wanted to recognize their efforts. We really appreciate you out here, guys. Sincerely. Thank you.